Food chains and food webs are our tool for showing the direction of energy in an ecosystem. So, organisms that show up most in food chains and food webs are either organisms that get their energy from the sun or organisms that get their energy from others. These can be called either autotrophs or heterotrophs, or producers and consumers. Decomposers also show up in food webs and food chains, but not quite as often. First, we'll learn how to make a food chain, which a food chain makes up a food web, because in a food web, there are many food chains. So the first step to making a food chain would be to list some living things in the ecosystem you're referring to. The ecosystem I am making food chains and food webs for today is the Arctic or the tundra. So, my living things that I have listed here are a lemming, which is a small rodent, a leopard seal, krill, and phytoplankton. Those are some living things in my ecosystem. The next step is to figure out what eats what. So, as you can see on my example here, I say that the leopard seal eats krill, but then also I have listed that krill eats phytoplankton. Both of these statements are true in the ecosystem, and they are statements that are going to help us to make a food chain. Now, the last part is to draw your food chain with arrows pointing away from organisms being eaten. This is because the energy in the ecosystem is moving from the organism being eaten to the organism eating that organism, right? So the energy is going to be shown moving in that direction. Now, when you draw out your food chain, you are going to start with two organisms, one being eaten by the other. So in our example here, you see that phytoplankton are eaten by krill. So the arrow is going from phytoplankton to krill. The next example is that krill are eaten by a leopard seal. So as you can see, the arrow is going from the krill to the leopard seal. This is obviously a very simple food chain, but this food chain shows the flow of energy in the ecosystem for these specific organisms. Phytoplankton passes its energy to the krill because it's eaten by the krill, and the krill passes its energy to the leopard seal because it is eaten by the leopard seal. Then what we have is how to make a food web. So, a food web contains many food chains. A food web contains many food chains. So, as you can see at the bottom of this food web here, pictured, the bottom three organisms are the original food chain that we wrote out before with the phytoplankton, the krill, and the leopard seal. Now, from that original food chain, all you need to do is think about other organisms that energy is passed to. So, in the example of our original food chain, we had the phytoplankton to the krill to the leopard seal, and then a polar bear might eat the leopard seal, or an Arctic wolf might eat a leopard seal. So, energy will be passed on to those organisms. Then, what you can see is I incorporated my lemming because the Arctic wolf is an organism that might eat the lemming. And then the lemming would eat hairgrass, right? And so the energy flow would be from the hairgrass to the lemming to the Arctic wolf. Now, you can see that there are multiple food chains in the same food web due to what the flow of energy is. We have a food chain from our original one, the phytoplankton to the krill to the leopard seal, and then to the polar bear. But we also have a food chain in phytoplankton to krill directly to polar bear because the polar bear would also be eating krill as well as the leopard seal. So, as you can see in a food web, there are multiple food chains showing the flow of energy.